this presentation is mainly designed for people that want to get started. There will be some information for people with an advanced program. And I know that there are many brands that have been doing this for maybe 5+ years, but this is mainly designed to get people into the activation stage who are thinking about working with influencers, or maybe you've worked with a couple of influencers and you want to scale this program out. So just quickly about Onalytica, we've run 5,000+ influencer marketing, influencer advocacy programs, 10+ years of experience, and we're backed by Michael Birch and Paul Birch, who set up Bebo back in the day and sold to AOL for $850 million in 2008. So we typically work with a lot of B2B brands, technology, professional services, finance, energy, environment, healthcare, for example. So that's just a bit about us. The agenda here, we're going to talk about the challenges we face as B2B marketers. We're going to talk about awareness, credibility, and trust, how you can improve those with your target audiences. We're going to look at who influences the end decision maker, who does our audience trust, and what do B2B influencers look like? Who are they? They aren't the Instagrammers and the TikTok influencers of B2C. So let's take a deep dive into the types of influencers, and then look at some of the use cases for B2B influencer marketing, because actually, even though we all, are in around influence marketing, a lot of people don't like the term influence marketing. So it can be, it can appear as a brand ambassador program or some, driving events impact. So it doesn't always have to be called influence marketing, even though influencers can be integral to the use case. So there's some really interesting sort of phraseology around that can help you get your business case through. Then we'll talk about a 5-step approach to how B2B influence marketing can be successful, run through some KPIs, some workflows, and then leave you with a few ingredients for success as well. So let's just get cracking into the presentation. Just looking at why influencer marketing is really, really important. There are a myriad of reasons, but these are 6 areas which are really working against B2B marketers at the moment. There's just so much content out there. The pandemic has accelerated this 5 years. We believe a lot of experts do in the marketplace. So there's just so much content. Everyone can create content now. People are just pushing out content, and there's a lot of noise, and obviously you're trying to get the signal and the impact as your brand. There's also a lack of trust. We're going to talk about that. That's a key part of why influencers are required, and advertising is not as cost effective. People are ignoring adverts, and that's a real issue for B2B marketing. Brands, even though they've got great awareness, need to constantly reinvent themselves. I mean, Microsoft went through a big, brand reputation change, going from being known for Office to being a leading AI provider globally. And so even if you've got your widespread awareness, you need to change your reputation. You need to constantly drive innovation. And also the demographic of key decision makers is really changing. There's a significant percentage of decision makers that are now the millennial target audience for brands. So that means that traditional comms and marketing, these broadcast approaches, are not getting through to these key decision makers, and indeed people that are older than millennials who don't use those traditional channels anymore. The other part, which is much more nuanced, but is one of the most complex challenges, is that there are so many key decision makers within one organization. Fishburne Hedges produced a study, Forrester, there's lots of other research reports out there. There are sometimes 15 to 18 key decision makers within one organization. So being able to create content for a customer journey is incredibly difficult when you've got 15 different personas. So a ton of challenges for B2B marketing, and influence marketing can help solve a lot of these. Another part which we see is that a lot of brand marketing content is just being ignored. Also, organic reach on social is declining. So there's a real challenge. If you just create some content, you push it out on your brand channel, it doesn't get seen by anyone, and the content is just not performing well. So you either have to overpay with advertising, to be able to get some kind of return there, or you need another way. And we're going to talk about that alternative way in this session. A lot of brands have transitioned from the what to the why, and this is really, really important, because no one's interested in what products you sell. They're interested in the impact and what innovation or challenges is going to solve within the industry. So any brand that is self-serving or talking about why they're the best and how good their products are not going to drive the impact within marketing. So this is a big switch to how are we going to solve the challenges in the marketplace, how are we going to talk about innovation with influencers, both internally and externally, and then through their customer journey, they can find out what products you're selling. But you don't start with the what. That's really, really important. And this is really, showing some of the trends in content creation over the last 5 years. People are moving from white papers, senior exec interviews, exec panels, writing their own blog posts about their product launches, to actually integrating the influencers at the beginning of the content creation process, because they can tell a story in a much more engaging way. It's more personalized, it's more relevant to their target audience, and they've got far greater engagement on their networks. So let them promote your launches, let them promote your research, but not by talking about how good your research is, by talking about the really interesting issues and topics that are going to help the industry. And then when people click on the links or the content, then they can go through to your content assets. So what we're finding is that the interactive ebooks, your podcasts with influencers, some of your senior execs and maybe an analyst or a customer, research reports with influencer quotes and opinions, for the influencers to actually release the report. Whereas previously it might have been embargoed for journalists, now influencers can get the scoop and share the content first on their channels. These kind of initiatives are delivering up to 30 times awareness and engagement compared to the more traditional means of publishing a white paper and then trying to drive a lot of eyeballs through advertising. We talked about trust. Trust is broken in a number of different ways, and if we're looking at building credibility and trust with target audiences, then what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive the thought leadership, the perception change, demand generation. We're trying to access new audiences. Those are the key benefits. But the trust issue, which we're just talking about, Edelman's trust barometer backs this up, that there's been a declining trust for a number of years in CEOs, financial analysts, board of directors, journalists, government officials, all of these people that are trying to convince target audiences of their messages. There's a declining trust in all of those groups, but there is an increase in trust with people like us. So your peers, so a regular employee, or someone that might be a technical expert in the tech industry, for example, or might be, if you're looking at transport, maybe they're a pilot, for an airline. Though we trust those people more than we would the actual airline's brand voice. So what's really interesting is that the trust barometer has shifted to the employees and external influencers. And that's where, if you're able to create content with your internal experts and external influencers, that is going to get you the best results. And so obviously, that lends us nicely to go into the, who is an influencer and how can you start activating them? So my definition of an influencer, and I'm trying to be helpful here because everyone listening here is an influencer. You all influence somebody. And so the word influencer has a lot of issues around it. When people talk about influencers, they tend to talk about the non-traditional influencers. So journalists are managed by PR, analysts are managed by analyst relations, and politicians or policymakers are managed by external affairs or government affairs teams. You've already got people in place to manage those influencer groups. When we talk about influence marketing, it tends to be the people that are also influencing your target audience who just don't fit into those categories and are not the beauty influencer with 100,000 followers on their Instagram account, because we're talking B2B. So think of it as these other influencers, these social influencers that are not a journalist, analyst, and politician, formally, but are influencing your end buyer. And typically there's no one managing this influencer group, although more and more over the past few years, there are people with influencer relations or influencer marketing job titles. And we've seen a meteoric rise in those kind of job titles. So I expect in the next 2 to 5 years for there to be probably about 50,000 people with job titles on LinkedIn with influencer marketing and influencer relations. At the moment, if you type in influencer relations or influencer marketing to LinkedIn, you will find a lot of people come up, but it's just part of their job description, but they might be a marketing director or a head of social media, for example. So the marketplace is evolving at a rapid speed. That definition should hopefully help you internally talk about who it isn't as well as who it could be. So what do these influencers look like? They internally, if you look at the top of this this image, you can see your employees. So you're going to have your execs and senior management. They obviously have intrinsic influence and can create content and can deliver impact externally within your industry. There's also your internal subject matter experts. So are they experts on AI or climate change or the future of energy, the future of work, on health tech, for example? These are people that can drive real impact. And then there's sales and marketing. Everyone's heard of social selling, social engagement, and your sales experts can really start creating and sharing content with their prospects as part of an ABM strategy, and they can really be part of your influencer marketing strategy. And then there's the wider employees, so all of your staff. Could be in HR, for example, and they could, just by sharing content, it could be picked up by their networks that could influence your end decision maker. Then we're looking at the external influencers on the bottom right. So what we do at Onalytica is we classify the influencers into different personas, because the term influencer is not too helpful in knowing who you want to target. So there are professional influencers that are whose sole job is to try and win work with brands, to create content and to deliver impact, be it awareness or driving leads, for example, for brands. In the tech space, there's probably about 500 influencers that are well known globally doing this on a full-time basis. There are also people that just amplify content. They don't create content, but they just amplify it with their networks if it's relevant to their audience. There are other people who are content creators. So think of podcasters, YouTubers. There are a lot of people creating organic video on LinkedIn. They might be running LinkedIn Lives with one influencer like Bernard Marr, and AI has over 1 million followers on LinkedIn. He writes articles on LinkedIn. He writes articles on Forbes, and he gets a tremendous amount of engagement when he's talking about AI. So there are some content creators there. There are some industry practitioners that would never call themselves influencers. So they're industry experts that are just employed by their organization, that are very, very knowledgeable about these topics. And they will speak at your events. They will create content with you if you create the right value proposition for them. There are also event speakers. Now, event speakers, if you're doing a keynote, tends to be paid. If you're part of a panel, maybe you can engage them organically. And then there are academics, your researchers, scientists, analysts and journalists. They obviously won't get paid, but they might be part of your content journey, or they might want to be sharing your research and insights if it delivers value for them. So when you talk about influencers, please don't use this generic term. The generic term is for the category, but influencers are real people, and we would all describe ourselves with different roles and personas here. There's also the decision makers. So if your decision maker on the left happens to be a CTO, there are CTOs out there that are going to be very influential to convince other CTOs, because don't forget, from the Edelman Trust Barometer, people trust peer influencers more than they trust your brand. So you can go right to your end customer and you can involve them in your content creation, and other customers will trust them more than you as the brand. So really, when we're looking at the sphere of influence, we're looking at employees, external influencers, and we're looking at decision makers. Could be your customers, could be prospects, could be just be people in the industry. And what I think is really interesting about how the marketplace is evolving is back in 1988, Computer World ran an article about the growth of electronic mail. And Walters Ulrich of Coopers and Lybrand Consulting said that by the year 2000, I think that email is going to be mainstream. Now, I don't think anyone who's listening here would have thought that that would be something that we would be discussing in 1988, whether email was going to go mainstream or not. Obviously, it's part of everyone's day-to-day life. There's a ton of email. It's probably far too much right now. The reason why I make this point is because people are talking about social media and influencers in the same way now than they were talking about email in 1988. Social media is not 100% of your social media's team's job. It's actually 1% of everyone's job, and even more in lots of people's roles. It could be up to 10 or 15%. So social media and creating content with influential voices is something that a lot of brands are doing, not all brands are doing, but in the years to come, this is not going to be optional. This is going to be something that is required for brands to have competitive advantage. When we talk about execs or subject matter experts being on social, you might have real experts on social doing really well. You might have some people that really don't feel comfortable on social. This is not going to be optional in the next 5 years. If your exec is going for a new job interview over the next few years, then they're going to need a social presence to deliver impact, because they can create content that speaks to 20,000 people rather than just speaking to 200 people, in a sort of a direct, video call like this. So influencer marketing and social media is the current, it is the future. It's not optional, but obviously there's different ways of going about working with influential voices. So really the five-step approach that we take at Onalytica, which can be applied to any particular influencer advocacy program, is 5 stages. So you start off with discovery. So find your relevant influencers. That's really, really important to see who represents your community. You can then start listening to some, you can engage some, but you've got to discover who they are. Then there's an insight stage. So you want to understand how the influencers would like to work with a brand like you. You also want to find out how your brand is benchmarked over the previous 12 months in terms of awareness and engagement with the influence community. So if you set up something on health tech influencers and you're a health tech brand, you'd want to see whether they're talking about your brand in the last 12 months and how much they're engaging with your brand, your employees, compared to your key competitors there. Then is the activation stage. So that's really getting in touch with the influencers and discussing briefs and talking about what content you might want to create and what the targets and objectives should be for the content. The management stage is really managing anything from contracts, if they're paid influencers, to keeping in touch with the influencers, ensuring that they are creating the right kind of content and briefing them, and just keeping up the communications as part of a program. It also involves payments, and sometimes when you're a brand and you want to work with a vendor, plus you might want to work with influencers, it might seem like too much like hard work if you have to add a lot of influencers and onboard them as like individual suppliers. If that is a problem, then at Analytica, what we do is we manage the end-to-end process. So you're able to activate influencers and pay them through us, so we can take some of the pain out of that and streamline all of the program. The last part is measurement, and that's really, really important, because if you've done your benchmark report as part of the insights, then you can measure the uplift of how well you're doing with your program at the end of maybe a 12-week campaign, and also as part of a longer-term vision and program, every quarter, for example, and have this sort of annual results which can deliver hopefully a 20 to 50% uplift on your benchmark from the previous 12 months. So that's the 5 stages. Influence marketing can seem like this whole new world, that there's a lot of things to it, but actually when you strip it back, it can be very simple. You can just find 5 relevant influencers. You can find out how they want to work with brands. You can call them and activate them and discuss what content you can create. you can then manage those influencers, measure the results, and this is something that you can do within a 12-week period and get some really fantastic results from. Obviously, when you're trying to scale the program, that's when you can add further complexity, but you've then got the results where you can start investing more in the practice. So when we come on to measurement, this is just a slide talking about 5 different metrics that might be applicable to different use cases. Because when I talked about influencer marketing being a fantastic category, but that the term influencer marketing may not sit with the rhetoric within your business. People might talk about brand ambassador programs. They might talk about thought leadership content series. They might talk about driving awareness on a particular event, or you might want to drive net new revenue from certain target accounts as part of an account-based marketing program. It doesn't matter what the use case is. The model still stays the same, but the metrics do change. So if you're looking at account-based marketing, you would want to look at how much content the influencers are producing, which is the same for each particular of these use cases. But actually, then you would want to look at how much engagement you're getting out of your target audience within those accounts, and how many times the influencers are sharing your branded content. You might also want to see whether your sales team are sharing the influence-generated content with your target accounts. So the metrics would be very much focused on trying to win business within those target accounts. If you're looking at your event impact, then you're looking at maybe event registrations, or you're looking at how much lead gen you might be generating from the event influencer panel that is happening at that event. So the metrics just need to slightly change, but the overall model is still the same. Here are a few examples about 5-step approach on how you can reimagine white paper creation, or when you want to create a research report. So a lot of people create white papers, research reports. There's a ton of investment, sometimes $30,000 or something like that into the content creation, sometimes a lot more. And actually, it then is a finished white paper that is very, very hard to market or to PR if you're in comms. You can integrate influencers a lot earlier in the process with white papers, and you can include, say, 1 to 3 influencers, set up some sync calls with them, and then start sharing the white paper or the draft insights ahead of time. They can create their own influencer content assets, and they can actually launch the research report or the white paper on your behalf, but also tell their personalized stories. And the results of this, when we've done it with professional services companies and tech companies, is that it's created 30 times awareness and engagement compared to how the brand's done it in the past. And it's just a simple step of getting the influencers excited by the content, because you're sharing some really great insights, but it's still in your brand voice. They want to translate it into their own story. And so once they understand the story, once as part of your launch of the white paper, you're promoting the influencers, so they're getting increased profile as part of this. It works really, really well to deliver the results you're looking for. So we've seen some really great results from 500 to 2,500 downloads of a report through influence-generated content. You're up to 2,000 listens of a podcast. 3 million impressions through just social posts through influencers on LinkedIn and Twitter, and 7,500 page views on a blog, which was sort of launching a product as well. And that's because the content is industry focused, not just about your brand. Also, when we're talking about ABM pipeline, you can segment some of your target accounts by sectors. You can identify and engage industry practitioners and professional influencers that are experts in those particular industries, and you can create the content that works really well for those target accounts. And you can also create an account landing page for those individual target accounts or the sector, where sales are able to share content with their target accounts and then direct them to your landing page, and this will drive the consideration and the leads within your target accounts. So these are just 2 ways of rethinking the traditional approach to integrate influencers into your use cases. Really, and this came from our 2020 research, where we researched over 350 global B2B influencers. There are three main ingredients to really drive the success of your programs. One is to think always on. Now, I did say at the beginning of this presentation, this was for people that might be starting their influence program, wanting to scale up. A lot of people start in pilot mode, which is absolutely fine. You might have a 3-month period where you want to deliver results, or 3 to 6 months. If you can extend the pilot to 6 months, then that's always a good thing. But you do need a long-term vision. So I think when you start programs, you need to show internally how this is going to give you some quick wins. But from the influencer point of view, they don't want you to contact them to deliver some content and never hear from you again over the next 2 or 3 years. They want to see that there's a long-term commitment to creating wonderful content for their industry, where they want to be a part of. And so 71% of influencers do one-off campaigns, but 25% of influencers work as an always-on basis, and the success rate is far higher for them. So the influencers want to be more invested in a long-term strategy, and so having a short-term and a long-term vision is really, really important for your ongoing success. The second part is quality of outreach. So it's really important to do your research on influencers before outreaching to them. You can't just message them saying, we've done a white paper, could you promote this for me? Obviously, they'll put up the payment barrier and it won't seem attractive to get involved. What's really important is for you to talk about their expertise and influence, that they would be a good fit for your brand, and could we jump on a call to discuss how we could collaborate around whatever you want to achieve. But make sure you approach it from what's in it for the influencer perspective, rather than just be too brand focused. At Onalytica, we launched our B2B marketplace a couple of months back, and just one part of that might help is the influencers are actually putting as part of their profile how they want to work with brands, and what really drives their motivations and desires. So by knowing that ahead of your outreach, you can really hit them with the right message, rather than it appearing relatively spam-like, or that you haven't done your research. 70% of influencers, 14% of influencers that perceive brands to do no research deem their campaign successful. So basically, if you don't do any research, 86% of your campaigns are not going to be successful here. So it's really important for you to know the influencer before you start contacting them. And the last part is collaborative campaigns. So don't go to the influencer with already a prescriptive idea of, I want you to do a podcast on this particular topic and you need to mention these 5 messages. It's really important to talk about what you're trying to achieve as a brand, and to get the influencer's creative input into the process, because they are experts at what they do, and they're very good marketers as well. So they create content, they have influence, they have expertise, they also know how to drive engagement. So if you're looking to drive 200 leads from a white paper, or 2,500 listens for a podcast, you share that particular objective going into it, but also talk about how you want to make this very attractive for the influencer's point of view, so that it's collaborative, and listen to their input, and hopefully have a bit more of an open brief. Here are a couple of case studies that we've done, one with professional services influencers. So this is where we just worked with 4 influencers, but generated 175 million impressions on a particular event. And this was engaging Sally Eves, tech influencer, Megan Biro, Cynthia Live, and All That Is She. And so there was everything from Instagram stories, videos, LinkedIn articles, tweets, for example, Twitter chats, just a variety of different content. This was for a B2B professional services company, and the impact was significantly higher than their previous year's performance. And you can see the engagement on screen, that they got 1,452 engagements on Twitter, 191,000 total engagements on Instagram. So these are actually people that represent part of their target audience engaging with their content, and the overall reach and impressions obviously went right through all of the different social networks, and blasted all the results out of the water from the previous year. So this was just an initial splash on an event which was focused around entrepreneurship. The case study with a cloud brand. So this was engaging influencers like Bernard Maher, Ronald Van Loon, Sally Eves again, and really driving the awareness on one of their marquee events in 2020. So first of all, it created so much more content, because agile content creation is a real challenge for B2B brands. And the influencers were able to create content assets, to repurpose a lot of the content, and it just creates a really high quality content stream around your event. And it also drives far more engagement. So 12 times the amount of engagement, 19.4 million impressions, and there was a 70% influencer share of voice against their competitor set in November and December. So it was a very successful campaign around the event, and this was just activating 3 influencers. So I promised that this would be a session where you could get started, you could create your own influencer strategy. And here's a little exercise if you wanted to spend 5 minutes to create your own influencer strategy, because a lot of people don't quite know where to start. So if you wanted to go to onalytica.com/strategy-builder on your phones or on your computer, then I can walk you through a few of the stages where you can get your strategy replayed back to you within a couple of minutes. It is on our website, so we do ask you to put your email address in. If you don't feel comfortable with that, then obviously please don't do it. I'm just going to walk you through some of the stages, but if you do it, then you will obviously get some value out of that, hopefully in the next couple of minutes. So onalytica.com/strategy-builder. Really, it starts with the objective here. So it's really important to not just say, I'm going to start an influencer program. Are you starting it to drive your account-based marketing strategy, your demand gen, event impact? Because don't forget, influencers can be PR, it can be analyst relations, your investor relations. You need to decide where the program focus is at the beginning. So you need to click on that option if you're going through the process on our website. Then you need to decide how you're going to measure success. What does success look like? So it's really important for you to actually pick the metric that's right for you. Then you want to find your perfect influencer. So is it someone with certain expertise, or is it a certain audience you want to influence? So it could be that you want someone who's influential in fintech and you want to influence the finance manager or the CFO, for example. If that is the case, then put in your particular target audience. And then there's location. There are influencers who are global and there are influencers who are local market. So is your business just based in the UK? Is it just based in the US? Is it based across EMEA? Or are you happy to drive global awareness? That might dictate the influencers that you want to work with. And then which channels are your audience present at? Is it something that you want to drive through LinkedIn? Is it something that you want to drive maybe through your email marketing, but you just want to incorporate influence generated content into embedded video within part of your email nurturing? It's important to decide some of the channels. A lot of our clients use LinkedIn, Twitter, and blogs and email still as part of their influencing content creation. And then what content will you create? It's always good to start somewhere. So are you doing a webinar where you just want this to be integrating influencers? Is it a podcast? Is it an event? Is it that you're looking to drive the impact of your execs and subject matter experts? Pick 1 or 2 pieces of content to start with, and then obviously you can start scaling this up as the results happen. So once you've done that, that should generate some results and give you a paragraph which should be able to describe your influencer marketing strategy. So it could be that you want to run an account-based marketing approach, you want to engage people that are influential on artificial intelligence to influence the CTO, and that you want to create some LinkedIn live content with influencers in the UK, for example, and you want to do this by a certain date. That could be the kind of paragraph for your strategy, and you might measure that by the consideration from your target accounts and any kind of pipeline revenue which is generated from those accounts. So that's just an example of one that I've made up, which could formulate maybe the sort of summary of your objective. So the strategy builder tool is on our website. If you didn't have time to go to that, obviously you can do that after this talk. If you wanted to email me on tim.williams@onalytica.com today, then happy for one of the team to share some free influencer samples or influential employees within your brand that might be relevant for a certain topic. We're happy to provide up to 10 influencers you may want to engage with. And also there's a business case template. Should you feel like you want to do this, but you're not sure how to create the business case internally, and that talks about whether your competitors are doing it, what content the influencers within your community are creating, and how much that is driving audience engagements compared to the brand content that you're currently creating. So it really gives your internal management something to think about if you're not doing this already and you feel like you should really be creating content with third-party influencers. So I hope you enjoyed it. Happy to help, and feel free to email me, and I'll share a copy of this presentation as well as part of my response by the end of the day. Thank you. Thanks so much, Gordon and Drew, for organising the event, and happy to work on the Q&A.
Yeah, great. I mean, really good session, Tim. Thank you so much for that. A few questions that have popped in. I'll take the ones from the chat first of all. One is around sort of transparency. When we talk about influencer marketing, particularly in the B2C space, ASA guidelines, hashtag ad, it's very clear about whether or not a post or an influencer has been paid. But it's less clear in the B2B space, isn't it? And I know you and I have had discussions about this. And I think Keith Lewis has also been having chats with you about it. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I know that Luke Brilliant-Jones is one of your speakers, and I talk about this a lot as well. We did a LinkedIn Live just a couple of weeks back on how to work with influencers in regulated industries. And this is what we talked about. So the summary is that create content that's thought leadership content for the industry, not talking about your brand, and that avoids 80% of the issues that are B2C. Because if you think about it, in B2C, you're saying, hey, can you advertise my product on Instagram? And the influencers say, hey, you should use this product, hashtag spawn or hashtag ad, and everyone accepts that that's the B2C model. In B2B, it's more nuanced. So if someone's sharing your research report on the future of AI and not mentioning your brand, then a lot of people are just not using anything, and there are no issues, because they're not saying that Microsoft is better than Google, is better than IBM, is better than Ericsson. That's not the point of the content. The point is to create awareness about the content. It just so happens to be created by a brand. So when you're working in industries, and especially if they're regulated, make sure that the content is focused on the industry, not the brand. You can talk about the brand has published this report, which I find interesting because of these reasons, but you're not saying buy this product, which is really important because that gets you away from a lot of the advertising regulations. That being said, a lot of the influencers that work with brands will put something like Ericsson partner or Siemens partner on a hashtag. If they're writing an article, they will disclose at the end of it, so-and-so is my client, and just disclose that they're working with them on a paid basis. But when we speak to the influencers, they're very, very certain and passionate about the fact that they never, ever alter their opinions or will have their tone of voice change, that they're going to just talk about the industry. So they don't need to put hashtag spawn, hashtag ad, because it's not classic advertising a product. And if you think about it, if you've got your exec reaching out, they could be a CTO reaching out to an influencer who happens to be a CTO, and they say, hey, do you want to create a video on this topic? That's just like you and me creating some content. I don't have to put hashtag ad. If you're creating some content with me, Gordon, we just want to create some content, and there's not on a paid for basis. So I think there's a lot of organic influence engagement which happens, And it's far better, if one of your employees or execs reaches out to an influencer, wants to do something cool, invite them on a podcast or LinkedIn Live, or write an article, co-create an article. All of that doesn't have to exchange money. They're just like having a good conversation and driving impact. When a brand says, we want you to create a YouTube video for us, then there starts to become this kind of like, we'll pay you. But really, it's for your time and expertise. It's never to talk about how good we are as a brand, because the influencers will then lose their target audience, because they want to create content for a number of different brands. So I think it's really an important question. But and of course, there are compliance. If you work with UK influencers in the finance industry, there's the Financial Conduct Authority, where you need to make sure that the influencers are experts in their sector that know what to say and what not to say. But that's really important.
I was going to say, but presumably the content is approved by the brand as well before it's being shared, collaboration.
Exactly, and this is a really good point as well, because it's also about the trust in the influencer. So if you want to start off working with an influencer, you might want to not do a live recording as stage one.
Yeah.
But a lot of these influencers have been doing this for 10 years, and you can trust them because you can see their previous content with competitors, for example. But if you were starting out with an influencer you haven't worked with yet, you might do a recording, and then you can edit the content and you can push out what you feel is right. So I think it's about engaging industry experts. It's about having the trust internally, and it's about being collaborative. So if you want to say, look, these are the messages we're trying to get through to the industry, that AI can really improve healthcare and save lives in these ways, then share your messages. But don't say, we want you to say that Philips is much better than GE Healthcare, for example, because they wouldn't want to do that, and then it becomes a B2C play.
But it becomes inauthentic, and the reason why the influencers have got such an engaged audience is because they're passionate about what they believe in, and that's why I loved your point about collaborative, rather than brands just saying we want you to work with us on this basis. It's much more about realizing that they are a creator as well, and rather than just thinking to use them as an amplifier, but much more integral in what they're trying to do. And a lot of the times I've seen amazing campaigns being driven largely by influencers that the brand hadn't even thought about. And I'm sure you've seen the same. One question here about employee advocacy. Are there going to be instances where a company wants to create an employee program where there are just some employees that don't want to be part of it?
Yeah, sure. It again depends how big your brand is. If you've got 100,000 employees, it's different from when you have 50. But the concept is no different, insofar as you'll have some people that are already present on social, some people that want to have a better presence but just don't have the right tools, and some people that just don't want to be a part of it. It's an opt-in program. You don't need to get, if you've got 50 people in your organization or 100,000, you don't need to get 100% on social. It would be good to help the people that are inactive to become socially active and to start sharing some content and to start their journey of following the right people, educating themselves, etc. But you'll have the top tier people that are thought leaders in your organization that can drive external impact, and it's about, I think, enabling them. So I think the key change is that it's the people led by a journey now. It's not the brand led by a journey. So brands think, okay, my job is to create a lot of content. And I would say to all brands, no, your job is primarily now to empower and to enable the internal and external influencers to create content, which is going to drive far greater impact. So let the customers and influencers and employees be the hero of your content and move away from the brand talking about the brand.
Yeah, no, I agree. And another question that's popped in is, should those employees be paid or rewarded in some way for being advocates, or do you see this as just something because they're passionate about what they believe in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, No, they shouldn't be. I mean, they're obviously being paid as part of their salary.
Sure.
I think the best programs are when the employees want to be part of it. So it's creating a program with the right communications where it's developing the employee's personal brand and it's in their personal best interest, but there's also a win for the brand as well. In terms of whether they can be some rewards or not, yeah, you can gamify some of the program. Not for if you share the most amount of content, we'll give you £100 Amazon vouchers or something like that. I think it can be focused around engagements, around metrics that really matter, rather than creating a spamming machine out of your employee advocacy program. So I think there can be recognition.
Yeah,
and kudos.
Yeah, exactly.
And value that it can be, for example, e-learning training, or they might be able to create some content with external influencers. You might help them to do that if they achieve a certain level. And that kind of value, I think, is more motivational than making it about payment.
And as we're talking about payment, for some people that aren't sure about what to pay an influencer, and they're wanting to perhaps do a collaborative podcast or a white paper, and they've gone down the route of trying to find what they believe is a suitable influencer, how do they know what the sort of rate card is of some of the services that is on offer? I mean, you know, you've been talking about sort of thousands of pounds for some people, and I guess some people haven't got any idea about how much those things are going to cost.
Yeah, I think it's the Wild West, or has been over the past few years. When we talk about that, you know, influencers have been paid a variety of different amounts for doing the same kind of thing for different brands. We're going to publish a report into this later on this year, because we're getting a lot of data on what rate cards influencers want to be paid, and obviously we don't divulge any individual amounts, but we can see across the industry the rates that are coming out, so we can start putting some real sort of benchmark costs against that. To best answer your question, to give you a quick answer, $5,000 can give you an influencer on a kind of video or audio panel and some promotion. But the caveat to that is it depends who the influencer is. There can be some global premium influencers whose time is so much in demand that they've got, you know, a rate card which is higher than that. There also can be industry experts that can be engaged organically. I wouldn't say for free, because there's always value in there, but you don't need to actually pay them, but you do need to offer them value. It could be insights or profile raising or something like that. So there's influencers at all ends of the spectrum, but the ones that do it for a living, you know, that are really, really impressive, that have the expertise, the influence, and the ability to create content, it tends to be between $5,000 to $10,000 for an initial piece of content creation and promotion. If it's writing a LinkedIn article, they might have set rates which are lower than that. If it's writing a research report, then it would be a lot higher, because that's obviously something that might take them 2 to 3 weeks to be able to write, and you would spend a lot of money on that anyway. If it's speaking at an event and they're the keynote speaker, then it might be between, you know, $10,000 to $20,000, something like that. It can be pushed up to $30,000 if you get the really, really premium influencer in the States that is speaking at like SAP Sapphire, for example.
Yeah, I mean, just on research and white papers, for example, often it's great to do to involve a number of influencers and get them to comment, even if it's not a whole writing the whole article, because effectively you're borrowing their audiences, aren't you? And I've noticed that you've done that with some of your reports very effectively. I know I've done it in my own sector as well, because it gives credibility to the brand, but also you're reaching all of these relevant audiences as well, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just right. I mean, you're not going to cut through just with your brand voice. You've got to,
exactly.
You know, everyone's got different networks, and just don't create content, you know, in a silo. Just create content as part of a collaborative community, and then you'll get the better results. There are some people that think, okay, well, I can create the content, I can push the buttons on advertising, and I can I can drive my KPIs, that way. But it's not as effective, and especially not as cost effective. And engaging influential experts and influencers is a far better way longer term. And I think when the results really just don't work from the traditional approaches, that's when people, even if they haven't approached influencer marketing, then realize that this is the way that they need to go.
I mean, you just talking about results. I mean, again, one of the biggest challenges that we still have in some areas is showing that ROI. I mean, when done well, I know in the B2C space, it's sort of 11 times higher than many other forms of advertising. And I know you were citing 30 times, weren't you, on some of the projects that you were doing? And I was noting, 500 to 2,500 downloads on a white paper. I mean, this is really good insights to share with people. But what would you say were some of the magic ingredients as to why those things? What makes something like a white paper? What makes something highly downloadable? Is it just merely the quality of the content, or are there certain things that are in play that are essential for making that happen?
Yeah, I think there's a few key areas. First of all, find the right influencers, create quality content, and then the content really needs a campaign or a program from the brand. So if you've got 2 hours of really good influencer video content, how can you repurpose that into 10 to 20 content assets? And how can that then be driving the impact? So say you've got really great influence content. Is this an email marketing campaign to drive people to an event, to register for an event? If so, you can't just expect the influencer to post on social and everyone to be flooding into the event. They can do that. They will drive some direct attendance. But if you're doing an email marketing campaign, embed the influencer content into that, make the email marketing campaign so much more effective, and then they will improve the email marketing rate. You'll also get some direct signups from social as well. So that requires the right influencers, create quality content, but then it's the content repurposing and promotion which needs a strategy behind it. This is just classic digital social media marketing.
Of course.
But don't rely upon the influencers to just do 100% of it. It's important to bring your strategy to the party. And it could be that you want 10 of your salespeople to share the influencer content with their key target accounts. You just got to make it. You just got to make that connection with the sales team. Don't just create influence content in a silo. If it's part of employee advocacy, make sure that the content is entered into or uploaded into your employee advocacy tool for the employees to share, or for the execs and subject matter experts to share with their own spin on it, and that they can repurpose it into their content assets. So
I love that. I mean, I do think there's some great content that isn't necessarily always repurposed in these multiple ways, and opportunities often are missed, aren't they? So no, I love that. Sort of lastly, let's talk about measurement criteria. There was a great slide in there where you talked about all the different types of measurement criteria. When brands approach you, what are the things that what are the top ones that they talk about or request?
Yeah, I think it tends to be awareness or leads, at a very, very top level. Yeah. But then people want, if you're in PR and comms, then you're not necessarily trying to drive leads. It might be about key message penetration, brand reputation, and awareness as well. PR and comms not going to turn down leads, but maybe it's more of a marketing play on that. Marketing would say, okay, we need to drive leads, but they also want the awareness and credibility and trust. So I think people want all of them, but you've got to decide what your main metric is. If you're going to showcase it to the CMO, we run an influence program. You're not going to have a 10-minute conversation necessarily about the influence program. You're just going to say the influencers drove 30% of our social registrations to this event, or they drove 2,500 downloads to our content, which generated this much pipeline. So you've got to choose the main one. But I think influencers can generate multiple different metrics at the same time. So credibility and trust are more qualitative, And some of this is intangible. So I think with metrics, do agree 1 to 3 main metrics, but this can affect the conversion of pipeline through credibility and trust. It can show up in many different ways. You just need to connect the metrics together. So don't just put 175 million impressions and then stop there. Try to follow the journey and connect it up to something internally. So if you're doing an event, how are you connecting this up to your CRM? If you're generating all of these event registrations, what then happens to the people that have registered through the influencer links? Are they converting higher? Is there a higher quality of audience? And I think that's where the advanced measurement gets really interesting. And people can then start saying, oh, did we know that people who come from influence generated content are this much higher profile or higher quality with the higher conversion rates? And so therefore you can start working out what the return on investment is from your program, which includes influencer payments plus the people involved in the program. Then you can start getting more advanced. But you don't have to do that when you start. It can just be, what's the awareness and engagement of this report compared to one we've done before? Let's have a straight comparison.